Hello and welcome. This is Rooflemonger and my friends. Today I want to talk about a fun subject for Street Fighter 6. As of the time of me recording this right now, we are just a little bit over 1 month away from the launch of Street Fighter 6, a game that will dominate the conversation for years and years and years to come in the fighting game community. And the one question I want to ask in this video is simply, who will be the first villain of Street Fighter 6 in the early days of the game? The villain of a game is simply someone who is the most hated character. It doesn't necessarily always have to correspond with tiers, as a character definitely does not have to be top tier to become a villain for sure. But there's always someone that always gets complained about. And in Street Fighter 6, it looks like we got quite a few solid candidates for highly complained about characters, given what we've seen from all the footage. So just to give an example of some villains from fighting games of the modern era. Roll back the clock to say the Street Fighter 4 days, a villain would definitely be Ken, if only for online play. Ken players, if you saw a Ken player, you'd roll your eyes to the back of your head because you knew there'd be nothing but random Shoryukens being thrown your way all day long. Moving up a game, say Street Fighter 5, Abigail for a very long time was a villain of the game because as a large body character, which is usually low tier in most games, dared to be pretty decent for a while, and therefore everyone's saying he was killing the game. So a villain for sure. And once again, being a villain is about perception, not necessarily tiers or results, because there's certainly characters in Street Fighter V's life that have much better overall tier placement and much better overall results, and no one minded them too much. Effectively, it's a very emotional concept for sure. And Street Fighter 6 being an all-new game, and especially bringing in an all-new audience, a lot of people, Street Fighter 6 will be their first Street Fighter experience. The emotions will be running high for sure. So, who will be the first villainous character that everyone hates in Street Fighter 6? I will present to you a few examples, although in the end, I think it's really going to come down to one of two characters. So first, let's start with one example here of a classic character who's almost always strong and almost always complained about. That is, of course, Dhalsim. Dhalsim, traditionally strong in just about every Street Fighter game. He's always a threat, and people don't like fighting against Dhalsim. Simple as that. Are people gonna complain about Dhalsim in Street Fighter 6? You betcha, guaranteed. However, will he be the villain of the early days of Street Fighter 6? I don't think so, simply because it takes actual skill to play Dhalsim. Much as we may be loath to admit it, you can't just slop your way around with Dhalsim to victory. Dhalsim, you have to learn the setups, you have to learn the neutral, you have to be patient, you have to actually play good to make Dhalsim go. You can't just run a sloppy shop and make the magic happen with him, make the yoga go. Doesn't work that way. So with that in mind, and the fact that Dhalsim traditionally is simply not as popular as a character, I don't see him tearing up the charts in the early days. Will there be great Dhalsim players early on? Sure, yes, absolutely. But not in the numbers that will matter to make the general public at large mad enough to hate him and say how he's ruining the game. He just doesn't qualify for villain status, if only for the fact that the average player won't be able to abuse him and make people mad. Our next potential villain of Street Fighter V is Manon. One, she's a grappler, and honestly, right then and there, that's cause enough for most people. People do not like grapplers. Combine that with the fact that she has multiple vacuum moves that bring you in at her advantage, so you have to immediately guess grab or strike, and that can probably cause some problems. The only reason why I wouldn't put her up higher on the potential villain list is simply because as a new character, I don't think she'll be as popular as, say, some of the classics. And her grappling game plan is steamroller based in that it gets stronger and stronger over the course of the match. So it's not immediately terrifying out of the gate round one. So even though I'm sure she'll get her fair amount of complaints, I don't think she'll be the main target as a villain. Now, striking closer to home, a character I do think has a bigger chance of being named the villain of Street Fighter 6 in the early days is Marisa. Why? Because I believe Marisa will be the #1 scrub killer character. Maybe it's not a nice term, sure, but she's the character, has the armor, breaks armor too, big normals, big tough, all that kind of stuff, sort of tailor just made to beat newer players and beat lower skilled players. She has all the charge move mechanics and she's dripping with plus frames, meaning if you do not know how to deal with it, it will effectively always be her turn. And if you're newer to Street Fighter or the genre as a whole of fighting games, if you don't know how to deal with that, that's going to be incredibly frustrating. Perhaps of all the characters in the game, Marisa is the most tailored to abusing people's lack of knowledge about the game itself and mechanics. So with that in mind, I think she has a very strong chance of being maybe the villain of the game. Even if she winds up being low tier in the end, it doesn't particularly matter, because she's a character that will force you to learn the systems of the game as a whole, and her and all of her buttons and all of her options as the matchup. She is potentially the character of all the characters in the game that will punish people's ignorance the most. You will definitely have to learn how to fight her, and for people who don't want to learn and would rather just complain on Twitter, right? Definitely a potentially villainous character. Now, when it comes to potentially the main villains of the game, it's a lot more simple and a lot more primal. So let's talk Guile. People hate zoners. People hate zoners. They do. Straight up. Zoning is one of the two most reviled playstyles in fighting games. And Guile, well, he's definitely a zoner, and he's a damn good one at that. And his current version in Street Fighter 6, especially thanks to a lot of the universal mechanics, is one of the best versions of Guile ever. And on top of that, a lot of people, myself included, when you talk about the Beta 8 characters, the characters that were in the original beta, a lot of people consider Guile the strongest of those characters. Guile's probably going to be pretty damn good in this game, y'all. And simply put, in all the versions of Street Fighter and all the history, if you're not a Guile player yourself, generally people hate fighting Guile. He's frustrating to fight against. And especially with newer players, new blood, all that kind of stuff, newer players, they love to jump, and ain't nobody shut down jumping harder than Guile does. On the best of days, Guile is rough to fight against. And for all these new players coming into Street Fighter 6 who have potentially never faced the boy before, it's going to be a really bad time when they don't know how to move, and they don't know how and when to jump, and basically they can't play the game they want to play anymore. So for these reasons, I think Guile is going to be extra frustrating to fight against, and he's going to be one of the strongest candidates of the villain of Street Fighter 6 of the early days. Now, for Guile, I did mention how zoning is one of the two most hated gameplay styles. The other one is definitely grappling. And here we have potentially the greatest contender for villain of Street Fighter 6. The most complained about character, and that is, of course, Zangief. Will Zangief be top tier? I would say almost assuredly not. I don't think that's going to be a thing. But he doesn't need to be top tier for people to hate him and fear him. And Zangief looking the best he ever has been in quite some time, with all new moves, all new options, the drive rush mechanic allowing him to be on top of you all the time, the fact that pile drivers do so much more damage than they usually ever do in games. We got a recipe for Frankenstein's monster here. The pitchforks and the mob will come out in force against Zangief. And to be frankly honest, Zangief does not need to do anything special here to earn the hate and the ire. He has to just do the thing he always does, and he's been always hated for it. All grapplers always get hated for it, and he looks like the king of the grapplers this time around. Certainly not the only one, but he seems to do the usual grappler thing the best of everyone this time around. Manon and Lily are a bit more tricky. Compound with the fact that Zangief is a wildly popular character. Like, say, even in Street Fighter V, where he's considered the single worst character in the game right now, he's one of the most played characters overall and is played more than the vast majority of the cast. And now comes, say, Street Fighter 6, where he might actually be somewhat decent. Compound that with the fact that you're going to see a lot of him because he's a very popular character. The tears are going to flow for sure. And with that reasoning in mind, to me, I think Guile or Zangief, and definitely both combined, will be the most complained about characters for sure. And one of the two will earn the title of the villain of Street Fighter 6. Of course, there'll be other contenders, right? Like Lily, another grappler character, and seemingly has very easy access to plus frames and can bully you whenever she wants. I think in the end, honestly, she probably will be the single least played character. So for that alone, if nobody's actually going to use her too much, I don't think whatever she may be doing in the end will tear up the charts too much. JP, though, is definitely going to be one to watch out for. Once again, people hate zoners, and he's a very non-traditional zoner with a lot of options that generally don't exist in Street Fighter. So with a lot of unknowns, we're going to have to wait till launch day to figure it out. But he potentially could be rising up the charts in a very big way. He's going to be a character we're going to have to keep our eyes on because I think the potential is definitely there because he can do some pretty wacky stuff from what we have seen so far. And of course, in the end, being a villain has nothing to do with tears. I'm sure someone like Cammy, especially given the new options we've seen from her, she's going to be stupid strong and no one will complain because of course it's Cammy, so why complain about Cammy, right? We just have to sit here, suffer, and accept it. That all said though, those are some of my thoughts on the matter, and I would love to hear what you guys think in the comments below. Who do you think will be the villain of Street Fighter 6, the most hated character early on? Of course, there'll be years of this game, there'll be many patches, the villain will change over time, right? But in our launch window for the first few months, who's going to be that most hated character? Let me know in the comments below. And otherwise, well, I guess we're at the end of the video. So thank you very much for watching. Hope this video has found you well, and go out and play some Street Fighter.
This is the love making.